Hi, this is Maya Maida, and you're listening to the Food Solidarity Podcast. Conversations with people around the world who are using the power of food to create local change. Today we have the pleasure of hearing from Nora Fitzgerald, founder of Amal Center in Marrakesh, Morocco. Amal Center is a vocational training program that uses culinary skills to empower women. Over 80% of women that participate in the program go on to own successful businesses and find employment in the local restaurant and hospitality industry. Amal is one of the 10 organizations that was selected to receive the Food Solidarity Fund, an initiative by the social gastronomy movement to celebrate and reward those organizations that are working towards food security during this challenging year. Welcome to the show, Nora, and thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much, Maya. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you.
My first question for you, and I love starting out this way, is what is your relationship with food and what role does it play in your life aside from just eating and enjoying?
Well, I do believe that there's a special magic in food, and that food, more than anything, has the power to sort of bring people together, to nourish bodies, but also nourish souls at the same time. And it's a powerful medium to be working in, right? When I started Amal Center, there was something particular about the act of cooking for people and feeding people that spoke to me. More than, say, I don't know, making embroidery or sewing or, any other activity. So I also have 4 children. So I do a lot of cooking. We have a restaurant at home and a restaurant at Amal. Food is ever present in my daily life.
Amazing. And I did a little bit of research on you, and I know that you are American Moroccan, so born to American parents. And I'm also someone who is very much part of 2 cultures. I was born in the US, but my father is from India. And for me, food has always been a way that I've navigated my identity. Have you found anything similar to that? And has this influenced your work at all?
That is very interesting. I feel like for my parents moving to Morocco in the 70s, food remained a connection to their culture at a time when there weren't a lot of other means of connecting. For us growing up, we ate American, I guess, what you would call American food at home. And then, of course, Moroccan food anywhere else. When I started Amal Center, before I started, actually, I just had a very small project with 2 women. And what I did was I taught them how to make American recipes, American desserts. So we did cheesecake, lemon bars, chocolate chip cookies, cupcakes. And I wanted to bring a little bit of novelty, because in Morocco, the biggest food influence besides local cuisine is French. So anything of pastry that you might eat in Morocco would sort of be like a very delicate, like tart with crème anglaise or something like this. It's just a different type of baking altogether. So I remember, so I would teach the 2 women these recipes, and they would immediately make them much better than I had made them. The second time they made them was perfect, because I'm like a casual cook. I cook for myself at home, but in this project, we needed things that were pretty enough to sell. So we can have, chocolate chip cookies that were all different sizes. So immediately the women took what I was able to teach them and just improved on it so much.
I love that, and that sounds delicious. I would have liked to partake in that. Why do you think it's so important to empower women, other women, not only through this kind of vocational training education, but also just providing a space for growth and for community?
Absolutely. I think that you described it really, really well as a space to be seen, a space for community, a space to feel safe and loved. And the women that we work with come from some of the poorest neighborhoods. And I think there's a thing where, poor neighborhoods are all a lot of times invisible. And so the people who inhabit them become invisible to people of affluence and power. And so when like our space is in the center of town, so it's almost like bringing an invisible population and honoring them with a space among in a fairly affluent part of Marrakesh. And space creates visibility in that way. And the people who come to ML come, I think, it's for the food, but it's also to honor these women, to honor them on the journey that they've chosen to walk. And I just think that the whole thing is so transformative. A lot of what the women get is from each other, right? So we have like a staff, they have chefs, they have teachers, but I feel like the only person who can kind of do empowerment, so to speak, is somebody who's been in exactly the position that that person has been in. And so a lot of it is the peer group and the support that they give each other. And then a lot of our chefs and teachers, some of them are graduates of the program. So they're also very close to the women in that sense. I don't feel like, for example, someone like myself is in a position to come in and tell somebody, how to be empowered, who comes from a completely different set of circumstances. It's not about like parachuting in some model of empowerment, but it's about what really works in the community and is kind of from the community, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I actually really like the way that you phrased that, because it's always like this, everything exists already. And many times within these spaces, I like that you call kind of in a way they're invisible, right? So it's that beauty and that empowerment and that strength exists already. It just isn't necessarily brought to the forefront of, maybe mainstream society. It's maybe not seen by everyone or appreciated. And why is food such a good tool to kind of build those bridges within society?
Well, in the case of Morocco, I feel like Moroccan women are already amazing at creating something out of nothing. As far as food goes, I mean, the ingredients that the majority of Moroccan women cook with are very simple. It's like a little flour, a little oil, but a lot of technique and a lot of know-how to make some amazing like type of bread or cookie and everything's cooked from scratch. I mean, when you go back to what I guess we'd call underprivileged communities, it's like they're cooking in the best way possible for our planet. Like they're cooking what's local because they can't afford, imported food. they're cooking things from scratch, because the more processed the food is, oftentimes that's an added expense. For example, I know women that, like, the difference between buying bread and making bread is huge to them financially. So, like, they know if they buy bread, they won't make it to the end of the month. So there's just a lot of wisdom there. And what I wanted to do with Amal is just to value that, to build upon it. But they're already starting at a great place. Like, they're already immersed in a world of food and cooking. And so I feel like it's something that is familiar to them. It's something that they can have ownership of and they can build on. Now, at the same time, when they're in the training program, a lot of the women are cooking but also eating or tasting certain foods for the first time. And this is also for economic reasons. So for example, somebody who's living on a few dollars a day would never have gone into a fancy bakery and ordered a fruit tart for $3, so it's an exposure to a whole new world of food as well. Or like, they wouldn't know how to they wouldn't have tasted a lamb shank, for example. And these are all things that they're being exposed to, and then cooking at a professional restaurant standard. It's kind of amazing. And I'm kind of rambling because one idea is leading to another. But another thing that I didn't realize until the project started was that, so for example, like, if you're a person with a certain amount of privilege, like, this means that you've eaten in a restaurant before, like probably eaten in many restaurants. And so you have some notion of how it works. Like, you go in, you sit down, you read the menu, you order something, they come back, they ask you what you want to drink. I think we have already a certain body of knowledge around that. Whereas I just realized later, for a lot of the women in the program, they've never eaten in a restaurant. So we're preparing them to work in an industry that they themselves have not partaken in. Again, it's all these invisible economic barriers that I became aware of. For example, I had a couple of students who told me that because they receive a scholarship while they're studying, they said that they took a little bit of their scholarship money and they went to a restaurant, I think probably for the first time, because they said, we wanted to see all these things that we were learning. We wanted to see if the table was set in the same way. We wanted to see if the waiter or waitress would go through the same protocol that we learned. And, they were just absorbing everything about the experience. So it's an interesting, it's like food is also is an open door for them, but also kind of an open door into a whole new world that they discover.
Like, gastronomy is always this kind of word that you think of when you think of fine dining, and this kind of like high-end, very traditional, type of experience, because it's not only about the food, it's about this entire experience that is in many ways reserved for those who have like this perspective of privilege. So it's interesting that you raise that point, actually, and I think it's really beautiful that it is kind of like it opens up a door to this whole. Can you walk me through a little bit of the journey of the training program? So from when women get involved with Amal to the point where they leave and then move on.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So women apply for the program, and actually, I mean, I'm talking about other than Corona times, like I'm talking pre-Corona normal times. We would get applications, and we have about 30 spots for every 6-month cycle, and we could easily get over 100 applicants. So it's a matter of going through and finding the women who meet the sort of socioeconomic criteria. So we focus a lot on women who have not been given many chances in life. They haven't necessarily gone to school, or they've gone to a little bit of school. They might be in charge of a family of children for whatever reason, whether it's a widow or a single mother or divorced women, and local associations that offer other services to women. For example, we work with a shelter for single mothers, and we work with an association for orphans. And so as we're looking for this socioeconomic need, of course, we also want to look for women who have an internal spark, who have a motivation, who are coming with their own motivation to change their lives, to invest in themselves, to invest time and effort in themselves, because we want to invest in them to the degree that they're willing to invest in themselves, in a sense. And I think having clear expectations from the beginning is a good thing. It's a healthy thing, and we're pretty structured, I guess. I don't want to say strict, but you know, the expectations are clear that they have to come at a certain time. They have to adhere to the training. If they're not going to come, they need to call us. And these are just good professional practices for wherever they end up. You know, clear communication, taking personal responsibility. And so after they're accepted to the program, the women start, and it's a 6-month program. And so what they will do is they will spend 2 weeks in one post. For example, 2 weeks in salads, or 2 weeks in Moroccan cuisine, or 2 weeks in international cuisine. And so they do 2 weeks. They're usually like 2 students with 1 chef. They're learning in a very real way, like what they're making is what's being sold to the customers. And so it's kind of real from day one. And at the end of 2 weeks, we do a little assessment. We make sure that they've gotten what they need to be getting. And we try not to make it too school-like. Like we've gone through a lot of different iterations in how we do it, because all of this is something we've just created from nothing. The training program, the 2-week rotations, the assessment, like these are just our attempts to be as effective as possible in a program. Like we're not taking this from any other organization. Like this literally a whole idea that we've built up from scratch. And so at one point we were kind of doing like that they had to memorize the recipes, and then they had to make sure they knew them perfectly. And I was just like, wow, we've succeeded in recreating school, which has already been a challenge for a lot of these women. And that's not what we want to do here. We want there to be learning and not sort of stress around learning, or not an artificial like testing mechanism or something. Like they either know it or they don't know it. And if they don't know it, they go back and they learn it again. So usually the women, we have 2 centers. We have the restaurant, we have the catering center. So for example, in the restaurant, they'll come in the morning, they'll start to prepare lunch, because we do a lunch service. And at noon, we start the lunch service, and we'll have anywhere from 100 to 300 customers for lunch. And so everybody will be working together, the students and the chefs and whoever, our admin staff. Everybody at that point is equally involved in serving the customers. Then after lunch service is over, our students will have their lunch, and then they will have a class, usually a 1-hour class, which is an enrichment class. It's going to be something like a French class, because we've noticed that, you know, French is also one of these huge golden keys that opens up so many doors. They also do some English, and this is all sort of at a communicative level, you know, English for the restaurant industry, French for the restaurant industry. And they do life coaching, they do math, kind of numeracy. We're also open to having volunteers, so there'll be some like cool or interesting classes, like, you know, we've had a few classes like art therapy or yoga or something. I just feel like anything that is offered to them is enriching and widens their horizons and their experience of the world. So at the end of 6 months, we then set them up with an internship in another restaurant or bed and breakfast or establishment, and they do a 2-week internship. Now, a lot of times, the people that they're doing the internship for will like their work so much that this will lead to employment. And if not, then we make several attempts to connect them with a job. Like in the beginning, we promise them that we will find them at least 2 jobs, because sometimes, for whatever reason, the first job doesn't work out, and then we make an attempt to offer another job. And usually by that point, like sometimes everybody in a cohort gets a job. Sometimes they even leave the program early. You know, if she gets a job offer in the 5th month of the program, we're not going to say, no, you have to finish all 6 months, because, you know, it's a golden opportunity. We're not going to lose that. And so that's kind of how it all goes. A lot of explanation, because trying to sum up what, you know, happens in 6 months. And yeah, this is really, that's the core of what happens.
Beautiful. And yeah, I mean, that was actually a very concise summary. So thank you. And actually, just for curiosity's sake, so the women not only work in the kitchen as chefs, like and train in the kitchen for the, you know, actual cooking part of things, they also work as servers. So everybody kind of has every role in like the restaurant kind of thing.
Yeah. So one of their 15-day rotations is service. And for a lot of the women, I have to say, sometimes it's the first time that they're interacting with somebody who's not Moroccan, because we have a lot of tourists and a lot of expats or non-Moroccans who live in Morocco. And there's kind of a lot to unpack there, because Morocco was colonized by the French, and there can be a sense of intimidation when you know, for some of our students, I don't want to say like every single one, but it's a bit intimidating to speak to these whatever white people, and I think, you know, that's just part of the learning. And it's interesting, because when we're doing the French class, you know, after, you know, after a few months, they've learned some French. And I remember one girl saying to me, you know, she said, when I used to walk in Marrakesh, if a French person stopped and asked me a question, I'd be so embarrassed that I didn't speak French. And I just had, you know, I was like, I said to her, but like, you shouldn't be embarrassed in your own country for not speaking the language of a foreigner. Like, they should be embarrassed that there's even that expectation. So it's kind of like, it's a whole thing, you know, unpacking that, but also, you know, getting over that, because a lot of the people that they will work with in the food industry will be foreigners, and just coming to see that, how should I phrase this? Yeah, sorry. It's just, if I open this door, I'm just gonna like go off into like a whole different thing, and we won't finish our podcast. But anyway, so yeah, waiting tables is one thing that they do. And then when they've finished their 15-day rotations, all of them, I think there's 7 of them, then we've kind of see like, okay, well, this student really liked baking, or she really was good as a waitress, because and I think you've worked in restaurants, like there's a very different character to somebody who works in the front of the house as opposed to somebody who works in the back of the house. Like, for the waitress, it's, you know, you have good people skills, you smile, you have to be nice. And I think to work, for example, we used to have a chef who was just tell us like, the kitchen is the war zone, you know, my knives are my weapon, I'm fighting fire, I'm, you know, he painted it in this thing of like, yeah, you can't be nice when you're, you know, you're cooking and people are depending on you. There's a level of rigor in the back, and there's shouting, and there's, you know, it's a whole other world back there that you may not be aware of when you go to eat it in a restaurant. And so to some extent, we try to like fit them according to their sensibility, you know, where they work the best.
Yeah, and man, it must teach them I mean, it's definitely a lesson in like adaptability, I would say, when you're exploring the various roles in a restaurant. I mean, I also worked at a place where I was very much like, I was, of course, front of the house, but it was very small, so I had to be back of the house sometimes, you know, and it is like, it's like 2 different worlds separated by, and sometimes just a curtain. Yeah. But your training program was brought to a halt, like so many other things, because of COVID-19. What were some ways that you had to rethink your practices and your strategy to continue the work, but in a very different way?
So everything that I've described up until now is kind of in the past, because in March, Morocco ordered a massive lockdown, and we closed our training centers. And then ever since then, we've been in this this process that you described of rethinking and re-strategizing. We haven't had training programs resume since then. When we had to close the training program, I thought to myself, well, Amal is a place that was created to serve the vulnerable in our community. And we've been operating in one way up until now, and now that way has been taken away from us. So let us rethink how we can serve the community and what's needed right now. And what we saw was needed in the immediate, I mean, I'm talking like within days of the lockdown going into effect, was that people did not have food. People in our community literally did not have food. We have a lot of people who live day to day, who live in the informal sector, who just scrape to get by as it is in the best of times. And these people were not prepared at all. They did not have any savings. At that point, there wasn't any government assistance or plan with how these people would be helped. And just knowing that caused me so much panic that I wasn't able to just sit back and write it out. I think within a week of the lockdown, we'd started organizing food basket deliveries. And we started with a little bit of savings that we had, and then sent out a couple of appeals, and people donated from all over the world. Like, we raised over $100,000 for the food basket campaign. So each basket cost $50 and contained about, we estimated like a family of 4 for about 2 weeks. So we just, and this became our full-time thing. Like, we have a staff of 30 people. Most of them were at home. I think there were about 5 of us who were working on this. And we would just make a list of families, and of 100 people, we'd order 100 baskets worth of food, make up the baskets, do the delivery, start over again. It was just like 100 by 100 by 100 by 100. And this continued kind of up until July, actually. And we had, by that point, I think we'd given away about 2,100 of these baskets. So that was massive. It was so bittersweet too, to be part of that and to see how grateful people were for this basket of food. And I was just like, this shouldn't be the difference between somebody eating and somebody being hungry. Like, this $50 basket of food. It was so difficult for me. Like, I was happy that we were able to do that, but I also was felt like we can't reach everybody. Anyway, it's still in progress. Like, it's still an issue. In fact, I think now people are almost feeling it more than at the beginning of the pandemic, because anybody who had a little bit of something put away has by now eaten it or spent it. We're noticing how devastating the economic repercussions have been. Marrakesh is a very tourism-based economy, and tourism has completely disappeared since Morocco closed its borders. So we probably have a couple 100,000 people out of work in Marrakesh alone. And so we also, as Amal, we were pretty heavily tourism based as well, which now in retrospect, like, I wish we had more diverse sources of revenue, because a lot of our source of revenue was tied to tourism. We do a cooking class for tourists. The restaurant is frequented by a lot of tourists, and that's all disappeared. For us, like, our revenue is probably at about 10% of what it was pre-pandemic. So what can I say? I mean, at the same time, I feel like the same creativity that it took, and the sacrifice and the vision that it took to start Amal in the beginning is what's needed right now. So we have a lot of different things that were sort of avenues that we're nurturing in order to be able to, like, we have a motto for the year, which is to survive and serve. So like, we hope to survive. We hope to be able to pay our staff of about 30 people and keep our doors open. But it's not surviving just for the sake of surviving. It's surviving and also having a purpose. And that purpose is continuing to serve.
I think that, also here in Rio, tourism is completely stopped, and it's remarkable how actually at the beginning of the year, it was like so good. Like tourism was really, everything was really good and booming here in the city. And then it just stopped completely overnight. My husband also, what's needed now more than ever is that creativity and the innovation and the desire to serve that so had influenced Amal. And your innovative response, I guess, to the pandemic is one of the reasons why you were selected for the Food Solidarity, to receive the Food Solidarity Fund from STM. And right now, what does that concept, food solidarity, mean to you?
First of all, I really love the concept, just the word food solidarity. It resonates so deeply with me. And that's why when I discovered there was like a whole network of food solidarity, and I was just like, and social food, and I was just like, what? There's other people doing this. That's great. And then like reading about other people's projects, I'm like, yes, this is so good. Feed people, like just feed people. It's so simple. And so I think for us, this is what we're hoping to do this year. And partly with the grant from the Food Solidarity Fund, what we've done is, it's taken some time to kind of reassess now that Morocco's opening back up, and like we were doing the food baskets, but we wanted to stop and see kind of where the dust would fall now. And so very recently we were alerted to the fact that in one of the public hospitals in Marrakesh, that is one of the main COVID hospitals, and kind of, underfunded and whatnot, that a lot of the staff members, the day staff members, they're not included in the hospital food cafeteria thing. And so they can't eat in the hospital. They're forced to sometimes go out of the hospital. And it's sort of both unsafe, and I feel that like we should have their back. If they're willing to put themselves at risk every day, the least we can do is provide a meal. Like, I just feel like that's so basic. So we've contacted them and we've expressed that we would like to offer this for free. They don't have a budget, so we're not looking for that, but we're looking to start doing this with them and we'll be delivering sandwiches, and we hope to deliver couscous on Friday, because that's the traditional dish that's the Friday Moroccan dish. And so of course the big question is, how do you fund this? How do you fund this in a sustainable way? So we'll be starting with the funds from the Food Solidarity Fund. And then we're hoping to attract private donations. We're going to be looking at corporate donations and possibly some other type of grant. Who knows where. I feel like we just need to start and get it underway and then figure out how to pay for it. Like that, I feel like that pesky little detail of where's the money gonna come from. But I'm super excited about this as just like our reason for existing. Like we should have a reason for existing that serves an immediate purpose. And this is how we've come up with.
It sounds great, and yes, that's a pesky little thing, but I'm glad we could help you in starting that out. My last question for you, and I have an imagination exercise. Basically, imagine that we're living in the year 2030, and somehow we've achieved all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So there's zero hunger, zero waste, zero poverty. In your mind, in this utopian world, what does the food system look like? And how did Amal Center and your work contribute to that future?
I love this exercise. I got goosebumps just trying to imagine this world where we've hit all of the SDGs. For me, like the food world is directly connected to like social justice as well. So kind of like things that I've touched upon in this interview, is that sort of we are valuing the people who work in the food industry as much as we care about the food itself. Like that they're honored and they're given their worth and they're protected. So that's kind of a big piece for me. That we eat in a way that our planet does not hate us for, and just kind of reasonable, that we are just reasonable about food. Like food does not have to be always sort of more and more exotic and sort of more pushing the envelope and flying food halfway across the world to eat it, and all these things that I feel that like, is it not enough, like what we have right in front of us? Is food not a miracle in itself? The fact that there is food and the fact that we cook it in so many different ways, it's sort of like a miracle of existence. For me, it's enough in and of itself. And so if Amal can have contributed to uplifting the people who work in food and to creating a way that works for everybody, then that would be great.
Nora, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate all of the work that you do, and I loved hearing all of your insights. So thank you. Thank you,
Maya, and thank you for welcoming me into this world and network of food solidarity that I'm just so excited about and so inspired by.
Thanks again, everyone, for tuning into the Food Solidarity Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about the Food Solidarity Fund, the Social Gastronomy Movement, or Amal Center, please visit www.socialgastronomy.org.